There's 11 photos on the bottom. There was actually 12 people. There was 12 people in the early 1880s that had a Bible class together, and they wanted to bring a church to town. So they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and it was in 1886, in 1885, they organized as a church. In 1886, they got recognized as a church. It wasn't until 1888 that the building actually got built, but because they were a brand new congregation, 12 people or so, they couldn't afford to have just a pastor, to have one come and minister to them. So they shared the pastor with what is now the Gregory Community Church, used to be First Baptist Church of Gregory, but before then, it was Williamsville Church on Williamsville Road, which is outside of Gregory a ways. So this pastor, back in 1888, 1889, would preach Sunday morning at the Williamsville Baptist Church, and then he would ride his horse to Stockbridge and preach that night at First Baptist Church. So we shared pastors back then. Imagine that, on a horse, riding from Gregory to Stockbridge. It probably took him most of the day to do that. So that was a great pastor then. God moved to do that. There's 11 people in the pictures on the bottom. What there was is the rest of that is an arch of all the pastors that they had in that first 35 years. But 11 of the 12 original members are on the bottom of that. Next one. This is a picture of the church, what it looked like. If you don't know, First Baptist Church at the time was the building on the square. Right behind it, it's now Mel's Auction House. We'll see that in a minute, a picture of that. But that's what it looked like probably in the early 1920s. Next picture, please. So this is what it looked like on the inside. It was a beautiful church. It's kind of cool. If you look, we still have the board up on the top left that tells you how many were in membership, 138, that's a big church. The average is 75 in the America today. So there's 138, 98 in attendance. It's got a giving record. That pulpit up until I think it was 2010 when we did the renovations in here, we still had that. We had to get rid of it. Same time the chairs, we didn't have room to keep them. The window on the right-hand side. We go back. The window on the right-hand side, we have that still. That's going to be incorporated into the office. Dave Gersler has that. He's going to do some work, get it up to look real good, and he's going to put that there. And that piano on the right-hand side, I hate that piano. I hate that piano with all my life. That piano was in the basement of the old church. The stairs, you went up 4 steps, you turned right, you went to a landing, and you went up higher. We couldn't take the piano up that way. You had to take it through a kitchen. There was 12 steps in the kitchen. The stairway was about this wide. How wide's the piano? About that wide. So there was 4 guys on an upright grand piano carrying it up 12 steps. I was a lot younger then. A lot younger. And I believe Terry, don't you still have that? She does. That got moved here, and then Terry took that, and she still has that piano. So there is some church history that's still around from 1928. Okay, the next one. So here's another picture of the church. We know this is prior to 1950 because on the left side you see a tree there. There is no wing. It got added on, an overflow wing, because the church grew so much. You can kind of see the parsonage behind it. Okay, the next one. Okay, this is what the church looked like in, I think that's like 1970. So we can see that there's a wing on the right-hand side. That's the overflow wing. So what they did when they built that overflow wing, they dug out the basement. The men of the church went in there with 5-gallon buckets and literally dug it out, hauled the dirt out so they could have a basement in there underneath the church. The church didn't originally have a basement. You can see it looks a little different. It looks like they sided it, covered up the steeple, and like I said, the overflow wings on it. Okay, the next one. So that's that pulpit. We had it. You see the brown paneling, the ugly brown paneling? That used to be right over there. It no longer is. We'll get to that too in a minute. Okay, so amen. Amen is correct. You guys have if you're new to the church within the last 6 years or 7 years, you have no idea how ugly this building was. I'll give you a picture in just a few minutes. Okay, the next one. This is the inside of the old church. This is great. A young pastor there, Jay Thiebaud, preaching to the congregation. He took it from a congregation of 28 back in 1988. 28 people. to what we are today. It was a great thing. He gives credit to a guy named Lloyd Jewett, which actually was before him. God is so amazing. Lloyd Jewett preached at Boone Baptist Church, Northern Michigan, outside of Cadillac. I used to live in Cadillac. My folks used to have a print shop. Guess who they printed the bulletin for? Boone Baptist Church. Lloyd Jewett came in. My parents got saved. I was still a heathen. Big time. I actually went there once or twice. Don't remember a thing he said or did, but he was there. So he came to First Baptist Church. He got to start church turned around. Now, you want to know something that's even greater? God has got a huge sense of humor. My first wife, we looked for some pastors around here to marry us, and they all wanted us to do counseling. Well, she didn't want to do counseling, so she went and found a guy up in East Lansing at a church up there. Guess what his name was? Lloyd Jewett. That man has come into my life in and out more times than I know of. He married us. I was still a heathen, but he married us. Okay, so this guy, I keep running into him somewhere in my life. He's the one that started turning this church from a dying church to what it is today. And Jay did a great job. Young pastor, he was ordained here. It was awesome. Next slide. So there's another picture of what it looked like. You know who's sitting in the front row there? That is Kathy Bailey and her mom. Kathy Bailey, this is way back there. Angela in the white, and that's Bob sitting next to him. Yeah, Bob, look at that. Oh, he looks like he's like 12, doesn't he? It's great. You know who's sitting back behind him? Blonde-headed lady, she's sitting right back there. Okay, next picture. Oh, did you see it in there? This is crazy. The orange windows that were in the back, see those orange windows? And you see the pews, that green color? The carpet, you can't see it, the carpet in there is that green and that orange. Oh, that carpet was so ugly. Man, it was amazing how ugly that was. But you know what? That carpet is still there from the 60s. It wore like iron. I mean, how do you get rid of perfectly good carpet just because it's ugly? Oh, man. But anyway, it looked great in the church. Okay, it matched the pews and it matched the windows. All right, I'm sorry, next slide. The baptismal. This was a great thing. I believe I was like the second to last person baptized in there right before we came here. So we moved in December of 96, and I got baptized in January 97, and we didn't have our portable baptismal, so we went back to there. What's that right in front of it? Communion table. Kind of looks like this one, doesn't it? Just a little bit different. This one's got stain, but that's it. That's the communion table from way back when. There's a pulpit on the right-hand side. My first message I preached behind that pulpit. But it was big, it was heavy, it was hard to move around. We don't have pews, it doesn't just sit there. We move things around, and eventually it just got too cumbersome, and pieces kept coming off it, and it was breaking, and so we got rid of it and got something a little more conventional. Go ahead, next picture. This is what the church looked like in probably it was like the 1970s, but that's what it looks like when we sold it. And so we can kind of see that it didn't change much from the other picture. Steps kind of coming off to each side. The church, when we sold that church, they had a goal of 96 by 96 people in the church by 1996. They exceeded that by, it was like 104, 105 people in attendance. The overflow wing was full. The church was full. They looked all through town to try and find a place that was for sale. They couldn't find any place. So what's the next slide? Look at this. Amazing place. We have it here. This was open, sat vacant for like 3 years. This was the phone company. It was Alltel, then it was Verizon, then it was, it was somebody else. Alltel, Mid-Michigan, then Verizon, and we bought it from, I think it was Verizon we bought it from. But anyway, this was the only building open. Man, God is so good. He is so amazing. This building there was a purchase agreement already on this building with the Stockbridge firefighters, they had signed a purchase agreement to buy the building. Chelsea Hospital said, if you purchase this building, we will rent enough space to pay your mortgage payment. For whatever reason, and we know what it is, God wanted us here. They said, we don't want to do that. We want to back out. Pastor Jay and Jim Williams and somebody else went and talked to them. They took over the purchase agreement, gave them a $200 check, wrote it out on a napkin, and we purchased the building. Amen. God is so good. He is so good. When he has a plan, it doesn't matter if there's already a purchase agreement on it. He wanted us here. He made it happen. And I want you to understand, God is good from way back to 1880 all the way up to 1996, and we're going to see him even greater in this. This church, we moved in, like I said, December 6th, 1996. What's the next one? Oh, there's, yes. So this is what it looks like now. So once we moved out of the old church and into this one, we had to sell the church and the parsonage. Will you show us the parsonage? So there it is, right behind the church. The church and the parsonage went up for sale. It was like, I think they were for sale for like 3 months. They were for sale. We were considering, because we went from 1,100 square feet in the old church to 11,000 square feet in this one. So we said, well, we just got way too much room here. We'll probably have to rent some space so we can help make the payment and stuff. The church and the parsonage sold on the same day, a Sunday, to 2 different realtors for the asking price. Again, God is good. That is amazing. Who the heck wants to buy an old church? Right? Who wants to buy an old church? $116,000, and they said, okay, we'll pay that. $82,000 for the house? Okay, we'll pay that. 2 years later, what's the next slide? Well, we moved in, okay? 2 years later, we burned that mortgage. We burned a $285,000 mortgage 2 years later. That is amazing. God is good. Now, this is what the sanctuary used to look like. That's a picture from right over there looking this way. And this picture is after 4 renovations. Okay, this is after it's been upgraded 4 different times. Next picture. So here's looking from this corner out, or no, same picture that way. Another a stage. We had a slide screen over there, a projector. You see around the columns over there, the wood paneling, and we had a beige vinyl wallpaper. Okay, the next one. This is out front. This was our narthex. This is where we came in. Again, brown paneling and beige wallpaper. This is, I guess, after renovation. We put the floor tile in. There again is looking the other way. We opened it up part way because where the cafe is now, that used to be the offices. There used to be a 3-foot hallway there that went down to the bathroom. So you can imagine that was the big bottleneck in the church, trying to get to the bathrooms, to the church offices, all of that. It was a beige vinyl floor, commercial floor. Again, ugly as sin. The carpet in here was, when we first moved in, it was a brown and tan carpet, and it had to be 100 years old. Well, probably not quite 100, but the building was built in the 70s, and I'm sure that was original. Okay, the next one. So we had done some renovations. This wall over here, we had a mission statement. So we painted a lighthouse and all that on there. Look at the height of the ceiling. 9'6". Because that ductwork, not that specific ductwork, but the main ductwork to heat the place was at 9'8". So it didn't look anything like that. So we couldn't go above it. So we had to stay below it. So the ceilings were 9'6". Looked like an office building because that's what it was. It was an office building. So the next slide, here it is, another picture looking at it. Brown paneling. We actually painted the back wall. It used to be brown paneling. The next one, some more just what it looked like. Off to the left, there was a prayer room. Right over here where you guys are sitting, you're sitting in the prayer room if you're sitting against the back wall. And then there was a storage room over there. We had the baptismal, cut a door in it, pushed it out, and had a hole in the floor that we could remove in the stage where the baptismal could come out. Okay, next one. Okay, then the house. So we got into this building. We paid for it in a couple years, 2 years, and then again we got 11,000 square feet. We said we'll never use all this room. 4 years later, we're saying we don't have enough room. We can't park all the cars that are in it because our parking lot isn't big enough. The house next door came up for sale. That's the house next door. Came up for $225,000. So we said, okay, if we're going to buy this, we have to raise 10%. So we have to raise about $22,000. We had 1 month to do it in, the month of July. 2 weeks into July, we had about $6,000 raised. On July 31st, we had $22,000 raised to purchase that house. Man, God is good. He is so good. He met our need. We raised the money. We purchased that house. That house got used, initially we used it for some low-income people stayed there, and then it was the youth and worship leader stayed there, the old one. They stayed there. And then when we did the renovations in 2010, we took the offices out, so they went into the house over there so we could have room for the renovations. So we purchased that, $225,000 in, it was 1999, I think 2000, something like that. So we had use of that house. In 2003, the church went through just horrific times. The door should have been closed. We went from a church of 300 to a church of 80. Just like that. The whole leadership of the church was devastated. There is no way that this church should have lived. It just should not have lived. Except when God's got his hand on it, he loves to do great things. So he took this church from 80 people and built it back up to what you see today. He did that. There was the annual celebration in 2004. We had to take up a collection to pay the light bill because what transferred from 2003 was $19.96. Yeah, that was the other thing. So because only $19.96 transferred over from the previous year, we didn't have enough to pay the phone bill. We took up the collection. It wasn't enough. We had to take another offering just to pay the light bill. Man, God is good. We paid the light bill. We did all that. We made it work. We got through it because God wanted there to be this church here for you guys now. Man, it's an amazing thing to be able to look back and see that we have this history, this 135-year-old history of this church and how God has worked. And he isn't done yet. What's the next slide? Here we are, 2009. Church house mission right next door. See all the bricks in it? Every brick represented the last, I think it was $6,000 or $8,000 to pay that off. So in 2009, we paid that off and burned a second mortgage. God is good. Man, he's awesome. How many of you have been a participant in 2 mortgage burnings? Yeah. There's like 6 of us. And you know where we burned all them mortgages? Right here. Right here. 2 mortgage burnings in my 22 years being in this church. That is amazing. Man, God is good. He called, in 2003, called us another young pastor. Melissa was a part of that. Gary was a part of that. Called us another young pastor. We ordained him, Pastor Brian, brought him in, took this church. There's no way. As ugly as that church was, you saw, they came in here and they looked around, and I remember Erica's face when she walked through the door. It was like, this is a church? But God called them here. They heard God's call, and they wanted to be here. As bad as it was, as many things that had happened, and the things that had happened, like I said, this church should have been dead. There's no way. So you're being called to a church that should be dying, and you come anyway. But you can see what he's done. He had a great vision, and he has taken us places, and I just think we are only beginning. I said way back then in 2003 in our board meetings, we are on the precipice of something great. God is going to do something really, really big and really, really good. And I'm not sure that he's done it yet. I'm not even sure of that. He has done some great things, but I think he's got bigger things in store for us coming up. Because we got a pastor, an associate pastor, coming to teach us how to do the Great Commission, how to make disciples, and how to be a good disciple, how to walk with Jesus. Man, what happens when we start doing what God's called us to do? When we start doing the Great Commission? Man, all I can tell you is hang on, because God's got some good stuff. Okay, next slide. 2010. We renovated the church, so it looks like what it is now. Did the final renovation on it. We had to go and worship at the town hall for, I think we had intended for 6 weeks and ended up 8 because the construction took a little longer, the renovation took a little longer. So there we are, next picture. So worshiping there. There's the congregation at the town hall. Man, what a great thing. We actually had, I think it was 3 families join the church while we were worshiping at the town hall. We weren't even in our building. They came and said, we want to be a part of this church while we're worshiping in the town hall. Man, God is good. Next one. So here it is. And then I believe it was 2013. Is that when it was, Jamie? Bank came to us? I think it was 2013. 2013, bank came to us and said, hey, would you guys like to buy this property next door to you? Man, ding, 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 is there a green light there? It's God saying, hey, you guys really ought to do this. So we said, okay, we got to do, if God's calling us to do this, there's 3 things we got to do. We got to raise $30,000 as a down payment. We've got to do a, what the heck was it called? The fundraiser. Capital campaign. What was the third one? I can never remember that. But there were 3 things, and we met all 3 of those things in 30 days, the capital funds campaign, to be able to pay for this church. So we bought it's got the Crossroads building. You can see the barn, and you can kind of see the trailer in the picture in the background. So we did that. We had $90,000 because we raised 30 in I think it was a month again, or 2 months. We raised $30,000 to pay for it. We went through all the things. Remember, we looked and said, does God really want us to keep this and get out of debt? And yes, he did. So we did it. We finally got it renovated. And now we have church offices, we have meeting space in there, that the community, there aren't any meeting spaces like this in the community, so the community can come and do that. Man, again, God is so good. He is great. He has done these things. He's done awesome things for us. All right, is there another one? I think that's my last one, right? That is it. So that's my church history compressed. I usually do a whole message on this. And then God said to me that, or at least that's what I'm thinking, that if you guys are going forward and you're going to do the Great Commission, we need to have a little bit of evangelism and how to do this. Well, I know we've all been through evangelism classes. We've done stuff on evangelism. Well, I was listening to the radio. Janet Parshall had a guest on, and he talked about questioning evangelism. Okay? So it was not just we're going out there and we're going to blurt all this information out. We know all these things. We know Jesus rose from the dead because Josephus has a history, Jewish history. It's in Roman history. It's all these things. We got a ton of facts. We have all the information on our side to prove that Christianity is for real. It's the only religion out there that actually has it. But the problem is what worked in the 1950s because people had a background in the church and they had all these things. That doesn't work anymore, so you have to do something different. So when people ask questions, we can do like Jesus did and ask a question back, right? So it's questioning evangelism. How many times in the Bible do they ask Jesus a question and he asks the Pharisees or whoever else a question back, right? So it makes sense. So if Jesus is doing it, we should do that. Now, obviously, I am not going to be able to give you this whole book in the next 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, and I have picked out some of the larger questions that they ask, and I'm going to read some of the things that he's how to have that question in evangelism. When someone asks you, is the Bible for real? How do you know that? So when they say, oh, the Bible's full of errors, you can say, And you can ask these questions. When the atheist says, what is the Christian response to evil? Well, if there's evil in the world and God's good, there couldn't be there. So how do you respond to that, right? And a lot of times, the things that they're asking, really, they don't want to know that. They want to know something more. And so this is a way to get to that, to dig down deep to find that. One of the, I think I went one page too far. One of the stories in here that I read, also, what this does is this gets us to ask logical questions. So sometimes the questions that they ask or the things that they say don't make sense. If you apply some logic to it, if you just take it one step more, their question or their argument then falls apart. So we need to learn how to logically ask questions of these things and say, is this really what you want to know, or is this just a front? Okay? So this doesn't mean that you don't, because if you do this, if you read this book isn't going to give you all the answers and all those things. You still need to read your Bible. You still need to understand the gospel. Man, this is such a great time. What did we just spend 3 weeks doing with Pastor Brian? Preaching the gospel, right? I mean, boy, I'm telling you that message last week, that was probably one of the clearest messages and one of the greatest ways to explain it that I've heard in a long, long time. So we've heard the gospel message. For the 3 weeks before that, we've heard it. We've heard Luke 2. We just got through the Christmas season. How many times have you heard Linus saying Luke 2? Right? How many times? Probably 100. There it is. That's the gospel. So I'm not coming up here to teach you what you need to tell people. I'm saying this is a way to make it clear. Okay? So one of the subjects in here was he took some of the logic from Solomon and from Proverbs and said, here's 4 things that Solomon says we need to not do when we are evangelizing. The very first one is avoid an argument. Proverbs 18:19. A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Disputes are like a barred gates of a citadel. So the first thing we want to do is not get in an argument. And can I tell you this doesn't work? Because I did this before. I did this. Got a guy, we were talking about abortion, and we just, man, bam, we were arguing. Guess what? I got nothing from, you know what I mean? I got no witness to that guy, nothing. All we did was argue, and we both just went away mad. It really doesn't work. Avoid an argument. Right? From my personal experience, it does not work. The next one is recognize a fool. In a minute, I'll read you a little example of how he did this. But realize that sometimes people, they really don't want to know. I mean, they just don't want to know. I've got this guy over here, and he says this, and this woman says that, and this book says this, and that book, and they're just going to always talk about that, and they'll never give you a chance to get a word in edgewise. They really don't want it. You're wasting your time. This is where Jesus said you're casting your pearls before swine because they don't want to hear it. If someone truly is interested and truly wants to, you know they're not a fool. You want to have that conversation. You want to take it a little farther. Remember, people are people, right? They're just like you and me. They're just lost. I can tell you, lost stinks. I did it for 35 years. It's no fun. I did all the things that the world told me to do. They said, do this and you're going to have fun. You do drugs, you do sex, you do alcohol, you do these things. All this is just going to be so much fun. It was not fun. I can remember many times laying in my bed, crying out and saying, Lord, there's got to be something better. He didn't show me what that was for probably 10 more years, but I was crying out for it. There had to be something better than what the world told me. So people are people. They're just like you and me. They have body, mind, soul, and strength. They want to be encouraged. They want that. So it's not being adversarial. It's loving them. Asking people questions and listening is a form of love. So if we can ask those questions and sincerely listen to them, you will just destroy a whole bunch of walls. Because, man, what did Jesus say? they're going to know we are his disciples by our love, not by our arguments, not by our hammer. You're never going to bring somebody into the kingdom with sledgehammer evangelism. I've tried it several times. It does not work. Man, but if you ask questions and sincerely listen to those people, they will give you that opportunity to talk and speak into their lives. Okay, the fourth thing was remember the power of the tongue and or of the keyboard, right? Once you say it, once you type it and you send it out there into space, it's never coming back, right? It's a done deal. It is out there for everybody to see and everybody to hear. And once you've said something, how many times have you guys, just like me, said something to my wife that as soon as I said it, it's like, oh, man, I regret that. There is no taking it back. So remember the power of the tongue when you go into this evangelism. Think about it. Do it ahead of time. One of the things we need to do is we need to have your testimony. Know what your testimony is. We did this in our small group. And you know what? Most of the people in our small group, Christians, some of them for a long time, have never given their testimony. Have you? Have you told someone your testimony? Do you even know what your testimony is? Your testimony should be, I was like this before Jesus. This is what it's like now. Or, depending on the situation, you should have a testimony that says, this is how I'm living now because of Jesus. You know what I mean? I've told you guys before, when I took my spiritual gifts test, my mercy was 1 out of 20. 1. If you want mercy, go talk to Mr. Groshans. He has like 25. He is the king of mercy. Mine is number 1. It's just not, since I've been married to Amy, it's gone up to 2. I've doubled it. So man, I am merciful, right? So we got to know that and love people as people. Know what your testimony is to be able to tell them that to them. So sit down, write out your testimony before, after, and what it's like now. How has Jesus worked in your life recently? Because that's the most powerful tool that you got, is to say, man, this is how Jesus has pulled me through. He's done this in my life. And what are they going to say? Well, that's not true. Well, no, it is true. So have your testimony. Have that ready. And be ready to give it. Okay, have any of you heard the story of the blind man and the elephant, or the blind men and the elephant? This is one of those things that people of other religions, Hindus, other religions, they give this story and they say, well, this is how we know that no religion can take us to God, or that all religions, nobody knows anything. It's the story of a group of blind men wanted to know what an elephant looked like. They found one, and each man zeroed in on a different part of the elephant's body. The one who found its side concluded that an elephant was like a wall. The one that felt its tusks declared that the elephant is like a spear. In turn, each one offered a different description. Holding the tail led to a comparison with a snake, the knee with a tree, the ear with a fan, and so forth. But none of them had access to the entire animal, so none could say legitimately what the whole elephant looked like. By application, the blind men are likened to followers of different religion. The moral is, no religion can claim to have the whole truth. Something about this calls for humility is very appealing. So what they're saying is, no religion can have all truth. Well, when you hear this story, here's how you can debunk it. If we combine all our insights together, we will arrive at truth. This was given by a professor. Is that true? If you combine all the information from those blind men, will they have all the truth? No, they won't, right? They won't have the whole truth. But who has the whole truth? Well, God does, but the person telling the story, right? So the person that's telling this story can see the whole elephant, right? So he knows what the picture is. So that's a picture of the gospel, right? So they're going to tell you, here's what a blind man, all these blind men doing all these things, all have a different, so this is all the different religions. If we combine them all together, then we'll get the right picture. No, that's false. So if you're out there, that's one way you can do that, is you can ask the question, what about the guy telling the story? He knows the whole picture, right? And that kind of debunks the whole thing. So we can do that one. So here's the conversation as it would go. He's given us some of these conversations. The non-Christian. You see, different religions are just like all those blind men. None of them has the whole truth. How do you know that? Huh? How do you know that none of the blind men has the whole truth? Well, it's just a story. I know, and it's not a bad one, except I still wonder how the person who first told it could say that with such certainty that none of the blind men got it right. So that's the Christian. The non-Christian, I guess it's because he wasn't blind. What's your point? My point is that someone sees the whole elephant. In this case, it's you. What's so bad about that? You're the one who said no one sees the whole elephant. That's what's so bad about it. You're breaking your own rule. You claim to have more knowledge than any of those blind men. Are you sure you want to make that claim? So here it is, right? We're using logic. We're saying you're telling the story, but you have the whole truth, but you're saying there is no whole truth. Again, we need to think through what they're saying logically and ask questions. Okay? So the next one. Why are Christians so intolerant? Ever heard that? Oh yeah, why are those Christians so intolerant? So here's a conversation as he given. And again, this isn't the only answers. This is giving you an idea of how to do this. So non-Christian. I can't believe you're so intolerant as to believe that Christianity is the only way. What's so bad about intolerance? Non-Christians. What's so bad about intolerance? Are you crazy? It leads to hatred and racism. How can you be so ridiculous? You sound pretty upset. Well, of course I'm upset. Actually, you sound intolerant. Right? We're taking it back to him. What? You sound intolerant of my intolerance. I'm not intolerant. Everyone's intolerant of something. We have to be. Wouldn't you say you're intolerant of some things? I would hope so. So, right, they're going to get on their high horse, and then we got to be able to show them that's not. Here's another one. I can't believe that you believe that Christianity is the only way. Then why do you think Jesus said such a narrow-minded thing? I don't think Jesus was narrow-minded. Me neither. Why do you think he claimed the things he did about himself? He was the one that said he was the only way to God. Are you sure he said that? Or is that just something his followers made up? No, I'm really sure that he said those things. It's not just a few isolated phrases either. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and he implied similar things many other times. So again, you got to know your Bible, right? You got to be able to know in these things, so when they ask you these questions, you can say, oh, this is what Jesus said. Yeah, absolutely. Jesus said, I am the only way, the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the only way to the Father. And you can go to other passages where he said that. Okay? So then the next one. Why is evil in the world? Now this is one, it was a pretty long chapter and pretty in-depth, and before you get to any conversations, one of the things, if you're going to get an atheist or an agnostic that asks this question, ask them theirs. What is your belief on evil? Because you know what? They don't have one. As incomplete an answer as we have, because God doesn't show us why there's evil, all the different things. Look at the book of Job, right? First 3 chapters, we see the devil comes, kills all his children, takes all his crops, takes all his animals, takes his wealth, takes everything from him. And he's pretty upset with God. He worships God, he does that. And then we spend the next 48 chapters talking about it, his friends giving him false religion. And then when he finally does talk face to face with God, does he ever get an answer? No, he does not. Because God is God, right? And some things are higher for him to know than for us. We don't get the whole piece of the pie on why there's evil in the world. But we do get pieces of it. We don't get the whole pie, we get pieces. Does God get glory when good comes from evil? Yeah. Yeah, so there's a piece of the puzzle, right? Another piece is God never intended for evil to be in the world, did he? Right? He created the Garden of Eden. It was perfect. There was no sin. There was no evil. There wasn't anything. God's intention never was for evil to come into the world. But again, is that really a satisfying answer? No, but it's a piece of an answer. Okay? It's a small piece. And the other things, and we can put these things in there. So we have some answers, but if you ask the atheist, they have no answer. None. So put that question back to them. Well, what is your response for evil? Why is there evil in the world? I can give you some answers, but I can't give you all of them, and I can't one that's very satisfying. So here's some things, and it's not really answering the evil question, but it's answering something along that. So it's a question to ask. What have you found to be helpful in handling difficult things? So ask them, okay, this evil thing's happened. Your friend or your brother or somebody has cancer and they're dying from it. Okay, what have you found to help you in that? As an atheist, what do you got? Not much of anything, right? You haven't really got anything to hang on to. So when you ask them that question, now they're thinking about it. Okay? Now they're thinking more than just, oh, evil is bad, but what's your response to it? And it's going to give you an opportunity to say, yeah, I've had some of these things in my life, and this is how I've dealt with it. What has brought you hope during this trial? Without Jesus, we have no hope, right? It's just despair. So ask them that question. Do you have the kind of faith that has helped you deal with this? Some people have been comforted by praying during these times. Have you? How many times is somebody in a difficult situation like that, and if you ask them if you can pray for them, how many times have they told you no? Not very often, right? Maybe if somebody's a hardcore atheist and a heart of stone, they might say no, but I can tell you almost every time I've ever told somebody I was praying for them, they were grateful, right? Because that shows we're caring. Again, you're asking a question. I've been praying for you. Would you mind if I prayed with you right now? That's a good question to ask, isn't it? Someone asking about the question of evil. Something has prompted them in their life to ask this question. Okay? And then there's, after 9/11, why would we want to believe in a God after the horrific things that happened on 9/11? Well, here's one of those stories he told about they were a busload of Christians going off to a camp, and he was sitting in the front seat next to the driver, and I'll tell you how it goes. So this is a bus full of Christians, isn't that right? That's pretty much the case, I answered. I hadn't planned on doing any evangelism until we arrived in Florida. They were going to spring break and do some... You Christians drive me crazy, he jumped in. Why is that? When you Christians just believe everything you read in the Bible with blind faith. Is that true? No. So again, there's a place you can ask a question. But here's how it went. I could tell this was a barb by the way it was worded, by the tone of the delivery, and the intensity of his drag on a cigarette. A lengthy discussion of the Bible's unity, authority, inerrancy, or veracity wasn't what this guy really needed, right? So we got all this information, we can prove it, but that wasn't really what he needed. So it takes a little discernment to say, okay, what is he really asking about? Okay? So he said, I asked him if there were specific things in the Bible that we shouldn't believe. And the following exchange proceeded at a rapid-fire pace. Well, like the parting of the Red Sea nonsense. You can't really believe that. Why not? Well, it's not true. How do you know that? I read this book by this guy who's done a whole bunch of research on this. It wasn't the Red Sea, it was the Reed Sea. And the Reed Sea is only a few inches deep, and they could have waded through it without any miracle of God stuff. How could, and this is a question you can ask. He didn't, but here's one. I could have asked him how the entire Egyptian army drowned in just a few inches of water, which would be a favorite response, right? But is that a good one? Maybe. Is this guy really, again, that sledgehammer? Did he need to be hit over the head with it? No. So here's what he said. He said, also it paid that I did my apologetics homework. This is a guy that is an apologist. And I was familiar with this controversy. The Hebrew phrase that is translated Red Sea is Yam Sufim, is a rare construction that defies easy translation. So I asked him a question designed to confront him with his arrogance and foolishness. So how would you translate Yam Sufim? Well, he said, huh? How do you translate the Hebrew phrase that most Hebrew scholars say is Red Sea? I assumed you've looked into this. So he's not hammering him, right? You've read this book, you've done this work, so you've done that. Well, I just read this book. Well, do you remember who wrote the book? No. Do you remember what his credentials are? No. Well, something must have convinced you that this guy knew Hebrew better than the Christian and Jewish scholars who translate the phrase as Red Sea. Something must have convinced you that he knew Hebrew well enough to think that that word referred to the Reed Sea instead of the Red Sea. What was it? He became agitated. Something I don't think you want a bus driver who's transporting you and 50 students. I don't know. You mean you just believe this guy wrote it with blind faith? Right? Silence reigned, and I was grateful for the foolishness was evident to him. And I said a few more things about how the Bible has stood up to inquiry. So there now, right? He got the question out. He showed him the folly of it. Now he gave him the information at the end, and that was it for the bus driver. He didn't want any more conversation. Right? So again, wonder why, right? So this is it. Was that hard? That wasn't difficult. It's asking the right questions. It's a different type of evangelism than what we've been taught before. So, hypocrites. Oh, this is a great one, right? Because the church is full of them. Aren't we? The church is full of hypocrites. That's why I'll never come. So here it is. Some of the responses for the hypocrisy charge. You don't think all Christians are hypocrites, do you? You wouldn't say that the church is full of hypocrites, would you? So when they make that statement, the church is full of hypocrites, is it really full of hypocrites? So you can ask them that. Wouldn't you say hypocritical behavior is the norm for Christians, would you? You don't think that hypocrisy is the kind of behavior that Christianity teaches, do you? Or here's some other ones. Wow, that's hypocritical. The church is full of them. Wow, that's hypocritical. Ouch. I can see why that's so painful for you. I don't blame you for being upset. So we're empathizing with them, right? Getting in there. And the third kind of response, yeah, you're right. The church is full of hypocrites. Well, you know, I'm a hypocrite too. Actually, we're all hypocrites if you think about it. Right? And again, judging that person, what kind of response do you give? What kind of questions? So, things to think about. And then I want to close with these last things that there's just a couple of quotes that he had and talked about. One of them is emotional mirroring. When someone is talking to us about like someone dying of cancer or evil and a car accident, and you know, my friend was in a car accident and he got hurt. Yeah, I know, I was in a 4-car accident. Don't one-up them with what you are. There's one thing to empathize, but don't one-up them with a better story trying to say that you got some spiritual authority, right? Empathize with them. Say, yeah, I went through something similar, but don't try and give them a better story. Okay, here's one of the things. A rule of thumb is to respond to feelings with feelings and facts with facts. We won't get very far responding to feelings with evidence and diagrams. It's amazing how far you will get with empathy and validation. So this is a way, so if someone's coming to you with a feeling question, answer it with a feeling question back. If they're coming with a factual question to you, the Bible is full of errors. Oh, have you ever read the Bible? Oh, you haven't? Let's read it together. And you can show me those errors. Okay? Facts respond with facts, feelings respond with feelings. So that's kind of easy. And here, I kind of talked about this a little earlier. The amount of evidence is so heavily in our favor, we want to show just how good our case is. But a few well-chosen words that prompt our listeners to ask for more would be much better. So give them a question that gives them part of the answer or a little bit, and you know more. So you're just giving them a little bit. Draw them into the conversation. Have them ask you for more. Because if they're asking you for more, then they're willing to listen, right? Instead of just backing up the dump truck and dumping it on them, give them just a little bit and whet their appetite and get them to want to do that. Any phrase that leaves them wondering what else we're thinking rather than wishing we'd just shut up is worth a try, right? So leave them. Even if it leaves them thinking and they don't talk to you right then, later on, another day, another time, they'll come and talk to you. Does this make sense? Right? Is it helpful? Oh, good. I'm glad. I didn't give you everything that's in here, and I didn't do, this complete thing, but man, let's think about our evangelism. I see it coming. Man, I don't think there's going to be enough chairs in this place in the near future, that we aren't going to be able to fill it. It'll be an awesome thing.